We're normalizing the path to nuclear Armageddon. And we just have a normalization of lies, of murder, of instability, uh, of secrecy, of falsehoods.
So recently, Jeffrey Sachs went on the Andrew Napolitano podcast to talk about why he believes that the world is more unstable than ever, that we're closer to nuclear war than ever, and that U.S.-Israeli military operations around the world have contributed greatly to that. He's one of the most well-informed political analysts in the world, so let's get his take on that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Do you think that Donald Trump's bombs hurt Iran or helped Iran? Made it weaker or made it stronger?
I think it made the instability in the world much worse. Most likely, the Iranians had removed their enriched uranium before the bombing because they had plenty of notice, and it was reportedly 400 kilos and not hard to move, according to the experts that I've seen give very detailed accounts on this. It ruined the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which played the game of Mossad and the CIA, of Israel and the United States. So it wrecked an international agency. It ended supervision of the Iranian facilities by the IAEA. So there are no winners. Iran was weakened because it was pummeled, but Israel was pummeled as well, and the world became even more unstable.
Yeah, I generally agree here. He's right about the fact that there's strong indications that Iran was able to move at least part of their enriched uranium out of Fordow, one of the three facilities in particular, possibly more. We have satellite images confirming a motorcade of vehicles being there weeks in advance. But look, Trump tore up the JCPOA in 2018, so they had really 8 years to prepare for this moment that, you know, the regime change that Netanyahu and the neocons had talked so much about might have actually been on the table. So they had about 8 years to make modifications to that, get the uranium out. And I think it galvanized the Iranian people behind the government because they were attacked first by Israel, no less. And it was a residential complex that was hit first, no less, in that decapitation strike. So it's hard to answer whether they were made weaker or stronger. I think it's a propaganda victory for Iran that they came out of this and retained their regime, and the IAEA is gone. And, you know, if you want, I think you can get a nuclear weapon now. They have unlimited incentive to do so, given that the U.S. doesn't exactly meddle in North Korean regime change, do they? So I'm mostly with Sachs here, and both sides got hit. Israel, his Iron Dome had a sieve, true.
Violence and war and illegality and assassinations were further normalized. In other words, this is just par for the course. Donald Trump bragged that this was the kind of bombing like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a language by the President of the United States about the two atomic bombings of Japan. We're normalizing the path to nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You know, you don't want that kind of bellicose language entering into any kind of language that would be disseminated around the world, that the world can see. You're talking about, you know, likening this to a mass slaughter that has rarely been paralleled in U.S. history. Well, hopefully not. I mean, this was a stunning success, says Trump, who, you know, only took regime change off the table, it seems, because of the Iranian restraint that was exercised and tipping Trump off, saying, hey, we have to make this strike to placate our domestic populace, but we're not going to hit your troops. That's essentially what happened. And thankfully that off-ramp was taken, but this catastrophe isn't over yet. We haven't heard the end of Iran. Netanyahu's already lobbying for more war, and you can bet your bottom dollar that there will be another propaganda campaign to say, oh, they're weeks away from a nuclear weapon. They've been doing that for more than 30 years to try to get regime change in Iran, and we just have to hope that we have a president unwilling to do that in every account, and I'm not sure we will.
How we're moving right now. if there were going to be historians after the next war, and there won't be because there won't be civilization left, but they would look at all these events and there would be a chapter written about how the situation became completely destabilized in the lead up to the great disaster. The next war, though, isn't going to have historians after it because this will be the war that ends everything in the nuclear age. And we just have a normalization of lies, of murder, of instability, of secrecy, of falsehoods, of engaging in negotiations, and you announce the next round is in 3 days, and then you bomb them the next hour. What is this?
Yeah, I'm with Sachs, and if you don't believe in the potential tragedy of a nuclear war, read Annie Jacobson's great book on this topic she published maybe 2 years ago. It deals with a lot of scenarios that would occur, likely, if there was a nuclear war, and she interviewed some of the top people involved in various governments and how they handle such matters, the potential strategy around it. And if you think World War I was the Great War, just imagine that kind of war with those entrenched, entangling alliances across Europe and the rest of the world. Imagine if that manifested in a nuclear war, and we'd be dealing with tragedy in which there are no winners, because of course, in nuclear war, there are no winners. Jeffrey Sachs is exactly right here.
Is this a game? Is this a video game? Is this a child's game? Is this our lives at stake? So what is, we'll see what the president says about all of this, but we can expect pretty much what is going to happen because it's been consistent for years and years. Netanyahu is an absolute genocidal murderer, and he's sitting in the White House, and he'll probably be lavishly praised by the president of the United States in an hour or two.
Yeah, he was, Trump begged the Knesset to drop fraud and corruption charges. Of course, he'll never go down for the cruelest and most pernicious charges that should be leveled against him as a war criminal committing a genocide in Gaza that's bankrolled by the United States, that Trump has only doubled down in support of to the extent that he was willing to let Netanyahu break the ceasefire he orchestrated there as he stepped into the Oval Office. He boasted about that ceasefire and, hey, I was happy. Anyone should be happy that's an anti-war dissident, that the killing will stop for a time, to be sure. But he greenlit the violation of his ceasefire just to side with Netanyahu and the Israel lobby over this. Just like he greenlit, shelving negotiations with Iran to bomb them when there were planned negotiations to continue.
Here's the Iranian foreign minister before the United Nations Security Council at an emergency session yesterday. Chris, 7.
What the Israeli regime and subsequently the United States committed were no less than an unprecedented breach of international peace. The fact that the developing non-nuclear weapon state has been attacked by 2 nuclear-armed regimes with the support of at least 2 more nuclear-armed states that are also permanent members of United Nations Security Council is only appalling and extremely consequential. No rule of law or logic allows anyone to target the IAEA-monitored peaceful nuclear facilities of another state simply out of speculation that the facilities may sometimes be used for weaponization. Mr. President, my people stayed steadfast and resolved in defense of our homeland against these blatant acts of aggression, and the aggressors had to cease their criminal attacks following the heroic resistance of our strong armed forces. We will definitely continue to defend with all force against any future aggressions. But this is not over. As long as the Israeli regime's lawless behavior is supported and justified by its backers and apologists, it is a shame that the international community has been unable to do anything meaningful to end the genocide of Palestinians for the past 2 years and stop Israel from occupying Arab lands in its vicinity.
So I was wrong. It was not the Security Council. It was a BRICS meeting, but you heard what he said.
Yes, and I attended the Security Council meeting at the United Nations just after the attack by Israel, and the United States and the Western countries threatened Iran rather than criticizing Israel at that UN Security Council meeting.
Of course they did, and they've also vetoed every single attempt to create a Palestinian state throughout history, of course, because that's what Netanyahu doesn't want more than anything. He'll let the world burn rather than that to happen. He's funded Hamas rather than that to happen, with the express goal that that would prevent a Palestinian state, and that goes back years and years. He started funding Hamas in 2012, ramped up the payments in 2016, and funded Hamas as late as 2 weeks prior to October 7th. None of this you'll read in any corporate media publication, but that's the truth. So the U.S. is completely aligned on anything that bolsters the cause of Likud, not the Israeli people. The corrupt Israeli government is what the U.S. is bound to.
They couldn't utter a word against the brazen, murderous, illegal attack by Israel. All they did was threaten Iran. If Iran responds, if Iran retaliates. It was shocking to see the brazenness, the double standards, the hypocrisy, the lawlessness by the United States and its European allies in the UN Security Council. I listened to the ambassador from Denmark, for example. She couldn't even have one sentence about Israel attacking Iran. Her whole speech was an attack on Iran. And Judge, I took the chance to look up because I was pretty sure that Ted Cruz had it wrong about what the Bible says. I wanted to verify it. He was referring to Genesis 12:3. And as usual with Cruz, he has the quote wrong. He said, those who bless Israel are blessed, or those who favor Israel are blessed. But I don't know if he ever went to Sunday school, but he never learned anything. What it actually says is, I will bless those who bless you, referring to Abraham, not to Israel. Israel isn't mentioned there. Israel isn't even yet present as of Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless you, Abraham, meaning, and whoever curses you, meaning Abraham, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you.
Yeah, this is right. This was what was called the covenant with Abram. He wasn't Abraham yet. I think this is Genesis 12:3. And Ted Cruz twisted that to say, we were taught those who curse Israel will be cursed and those who bless Israel will be blessed. Well, it doesn't say that. Maybe there are some warped translations of the Bible that Zionize it to that extent. I actually wouldn't be that surprised if there is that, but the original Greek doesn't purport that they're talking about an Israeli state, including the ancient Israeli state, which Jeffrey Sachs mentions. It was not even there yet. And, look, both Muslims and Jews look to Abraham, and Christians look to Abraham as a great father and ancestor of their people, certainly so. So this covenant was between Abraham and those he would influence the lives of, and not the modern Israeli state that was created by globalists at the central level in the UN in 1948 as part of a grand land redistribution project which caused wars that we are still fighting over today. That's the truth. It does not impel Christians or Jews to support the modern state of Israel, which is corrupt, which is treacherous, which does draw the U.S. into foreign wars, and, commits a genocide too. What do you know?
So Cruz can't even make a quotation right. He doesn't know the Bible. He doesn't know his Sunday school. He doesn't know how many people are in countries that he wants to bomb. He's an ignoramus. But he makes a lot of money, by the way. He makes money from his preachers who make money from their parishioners. It's all extremely sad.
He also makes a lot of money from AIPAC, what do you know, and boasts about it, and downplays the extent to which they lobby exclusively for a foreign government from within the United States. Remember when Tucker asked him, what does AIPAC lobby for anyways? And he goes, not much, really. And then Tucker Carlson pressed him further and said, what's an example of something that AIPAC lobbies for that doesn't reflect the interests directly of the Israeli government? And then Cruz deflected and went on to a different topic, because there isn't any. It asks for endless amounts of money from the U.S., endless military ties, participation in its war aims, its quest for a greater Israel, its attempts to expand West Bank settlements. That's what it does.
He also helps make public policy in the United States, which is disgraceful that a human being would be animated by stereotypical and inaccurate visions of something written 3,500 years ago as compelling him to to support a certain foreign policy today.
And if you're going to support a genocide like he does, maybe he could even get the quotation right.
Right.
Maybe he could even take the 10 seconds to open the Bible, as I just did, as you were playing one of the clips, so that I could read Genesis 12:3. No, he doesn't care. They don't care. They're playing games, these people, which would be fine if it were games. But this is the world at stake, and they've got to stop playing games.
That's right. Lindsey Graham said game on the moment Israel bombed Iran, because nothing, gets him more inspired than bomb Iran. You know, the famous song that McCain sang, bomb, 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 bomb Iran. Well, guess who played that as part of a video clip nearly, hours within it happening? Donald Trump. Donald Trump helped promoted this neocon scheme to bomb Iran, regime change it, reduce it to a parking lot, whatever they said about it. And we're just supposed to pretend that, the neocons were defeated. There's no longer neocon influence in the Oval Office. Well, I'm sorry, you made Mark Levin part of the Homeland Security Committee. There is neocon influence in the Oval Office, and that's clear. Same with Mike Huckabee, and Mike Waltz was part of this thing for a while, and Marco Rubio. All these people are diehard neocons, and we don't benefit from their presence in the government.
They've got to start telling the truth. They've got to start having hearings where people actually present evidence again. They have to start abiding by the U.S. Constitution, which puts the responsibility for war and peace in Congress, not in the hands of one person. This is what is at stake in all of this. And they're playing games with our lives.
Scott Ritter just told us that he has seen videos of American contractors who to a person are former military whom he described as maniacs, shooting Palestinians as they're lining up to get food in Gaza and high-fiving each other for doing it. Now, how can Donald Trump permit that to occur? These people should be indicted by the Justice Department and prosecuted for murder.
Before our political system fell apart in the last few decades at the hands of corruption, the Israel lobby, big money, so that we don't talk about anything truthful, there used to be a time several decades ago when an event like that would have been news. It would be discussed. We have seen the people being massacred as they show up in this U.S. concocted phony relief process. Remember, what the U.S. did was kick the UN relief agency out. Then it said, we'll put in our relief. And of course, Israel murders the people as they go in for food. It starves them. And then when the people line up, it murders them. Well, we can recall Nazi atrocities like that.
Yeah, this is completely disgusting. And listen, I'm no fan of the UN and funding the UN. In fact, I think the US should clearly withdraw from the UN and from NATO, by the way, obviously, and defund them. But this scheme is really treacherous and evil. I can't think of many things more evil than setting up this scheme, and we've seen it play out through the last few weeks, It's not a conspiracy theory. You can find mainstream news reporting on this, where they set up the food and aid lines. Palestinians come out of their shelters and hiding places that they're in because of all the shelling of these cities in Gaza. They come out to collect food, and then they're shot by the IDF. There's video of this in some cases. Israel's admitted this in some cases. It's absolutely preposterous, and I'm so glad people like Sachs are letting people know about this. It almost makes me break down. I don't get too emotional sometimes, but that is absolutely just off the charts evil on a scale that it's hard to even articulate.
And what we're seeing is atrocities before our eyes. But our political system is so destroyed now that nobody says a word. There's no seriousness. There's no hearings. There's no question of justification. Of course, we also have the Supreme Court that just ruled that Donald Trump can issue decrees as he wants, and the federal courts can't do anything about it, says the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the modern president, and it's not exclusive to Trump. There was that opinion that was issued recently, but for a long time, Congress has deferred all sorts of war powers, especially to the president, to act unilaterally. The war powers resolution is only part of that. But Congress doesn't do its job because Congress is more tribal than they are representative of the American people. They're more concerned about having the lobbies as their constituents, like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, than they are you and me. And that's clear, and that spills over into supporting this war regime and all the military strikes that the Uniparty wants to engage in.
Of the land. So what was that revolution about in 1776? When we said we didn't want to have one person rule? What was it about?
Well, it failed. We went from one monarch to another.
We are in trouble. And we'll see, look, it may be they walk out of the White House and Donald Trump announces a ceasefire. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. I don't rule it out completely. We're talking as they are meeting. But if history is a guide, and the recent history is shocking, the U.S. has been complicit in a genocide. I don't think any American could have contemplated that we would be in this situation and not even ask questions about it at this stage. That's how broken our political system is.
Correct. It's broken, and the U.S. government, the traitorous U.S. government, not U.S. citizens individually, the U.S. government is complicit with a genocide. It's bankrolling it, it's making excuses for it, and then money continues to flow into the coffers of Netanyahu to enact it. And spoiler, there was no ceasefire to come out of the discussions between Trump and Netanyahu, unfortunately. Sachs and I disagree to some extent on international consensus and, the impetus for which we have the anti-war sentiments we do and non-interventionist sentiments we do, but we do get to the same place regardless of that. I seek to do that because it's not in America's benefit. It's not in my state's benefit. It's not in my community's benefit. It's not in my family's benefit or in my individual benefit for the U.S. to be fighting these never-ending forever wars on behalf of Israel, the neocons, the military-industrial complex, the complicit warmongers within the United States. It's never to our benefit. And he, relies a lot upon, the international community, what its desires are, what international consensus is. Well, I'm glad if I agree to the extent that they want to stop the killing, but I don't premise why I want what I want in terms of foreign policy on the international community. The international community has been wrong time and time again, and we see that in these globalist organizations all the time. And if Sachs can see that within NATO, what is it that he can't see those problems with from the UN? And Sachs is not the biggest fan of NATO, neither am I, but you see how the problem can manifest in globalist organizations. So another thing he said I think is worth considering and discussing is that, we essentially traded one monarch for another. The Patriots of 1776 created two constitutional systems. One in 1781 ratified the Articles of Confederation, and one the U.S. Constitution ratified in 1788. And under their Articles of Confederation, it was arguably better in this way because there wasn't a solitary executive. The laws were carried out by individual American states, and there were only a certain amount of enumerated powers to be carried out based upon the enactment power of the individual states, and disputes were settled by kind of ad hoc courts and things like that. And there were problems with that system. It sanctioned the printing of fiat currency and the bills of credit, both at a central level. That's why you had the Continental. That was an inflationary currency that depreciated massively in value in the early 1780s, caused an economic catastrophe. And at a state level, the bills of credit. It was also almost impossible to amend. You would need 13 states to amend it, making it virtually impossible to amend. But under the U.S. Constitution and the Philadelphia Convention, there's a New Jersey plan. A lot of people don't know about this, but a guy named William Paterson, a delegate from New Jersey, proposed a plan by which executive power would be shared by 5 individuals, not a single one. But in this regard, but not in all regards, the Virginia plan won out. The idea to have a single executive to subdue his powers greatly. He wouldn't have war powers, but that there would be a singular executive based upon the model of having someone virtuous like George Washington. That was the idea. That idea prevailed, and I do think we're worse off for it. Now, not every president has been terrible on this. You know, people like Martin Van Buren and even James Buchanan kind of skirted the possibility of war and, didn't execute war even when people called for it. So we're in a bad state because of the powers that were transitioned to the executive unconstitutionally and unbecoming of the process and structure and political system that we're supposed to have. So on that, he's right. I see only problems from the U.S. relationship with Israel, maintaining close ties, Trump boasting about how close those ties are. And the simple explanation is to stop the entangling alliances. Side with John Quincy Adams when he said, America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. Well, if he saw the last century, I think he'd be rolling in his grave to see the monsters that the U.S. sought out throughout the world to destroy, and didn't even destroy them. Replaced the Taliban with the Taliban over 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of lives. That's what happens. So that's where we're at. Let me know down below in the comments, is Jeffrey Sachs right? What do you see from this U.S.-Israeli relationship? Do you think a ceasefire in Gaza is likely to happen again anytime soon? And what is going to stop this genocide? Do you think it will take a different president, a different Prime Minister of Israel? What is it going to take? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Napolitano. Also, he has great guests like Jeffrey Sachs, who's brilliant, by the way. And please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you do that, you'll support the channel immensely and I'll appreciate it. Plus, you get access to all my videos that will be able to be watched by you before they go live on YouTube to the general public. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.